Creepy things that were normal in the Mongol Empire. Introduction. The Mongol Empire was one of the largest empires in history. At its peak, it spanned from Russia to China and from Iran to Korea. The Mongols were a force to be reckoned with, both on the battlefield and in terms of their culture. Some aspects of Mongol culture were very progressive for their time. For example, they didn't have a caste system and women had a lot of rights. However, other aspects of their culture were, well, creepy. In this video, we will explore some of the creepier things that were considered normal in the Mongol Empire. So watch the video until the end. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And now, without further ado, let's jump into it. In the Mongol Empire, infanticide was a common practice. It was an easy way to get rid of unwanted children and keep the population under control. Infants with disabilities or sickness were often killed so their siblings could be raised in better conditions. In addition to killing infants who were sickly or disabled, others would be killed because they had been born out of wedlock, the father had abandoned his family, and because they were considered sickly by Mongolian standards at the time. The Mongols were famous for their use of crucifixion. Crucifixion was a method of execution in which the victim was tied or nailed to a large wooden cross and left to die. This form of execution was also commonly used by the Romans during the 1st and 2nd centuries AD. Crucifixion was a painful and humiliating death, and it was considered to be one of the most disgraceful and humiliating ways to die. As such, it was reserved for the worst criminals. Despite its brutality, crucifixion was a popular form of execution, as it was a quick and efficient way to kill the victim. It was also a deterrent to other potential criminals, as it served as a public warning of what would happen if they broke the law. In the Mongol Empire, you could be executed by being crucified, or you could be sentenced to death by being impaled on a stake and left there until you died. Crucifixion was also used as punishment for minor offenses, such as theft and adultery. It was often used in public executions so that everyone could see what happened to someone who did something wrong, and also because it made good propaganda. Crucifixion was also used as a punishment for major offenses such as treasonous acts against the emperor or his family members, murder, etc. But these were usually reserved for high-ranking officials like generals or ministers who had committed crimes against their ruler's authority over the empire itself, rather than just individuals within it. The Mongols were a nomadic tribe who lived on the steppes of Asia and were led by Genghis Khan, who was a great leader. He unified several tribes under one regime, creating an empire that lasted for more than 300 years, 1206 to 1368. Mongol society was built around clans, each with its own territory, language, and culture. A powerful chief would lead his clan to victory against other clans. He would then take control over these areas for himself or give them away as gifts to other chiefs in exchange for loyalty. This system gave birth to constant feuds between different leaders' families, and this is where much of family drama comes into play. Drinking wine from human skulls was a common practice in the Mongol Empire. It was a way to show bravery, respect, and power. The Mongols believed that they were invincible and could conquer any enemy they faced. To prove this, they would drink from the skull of their enemies during battle so that no one could defeat them or stop them from taking over the world. Drinking from skulls also had another purpose. It was believed that drinking blood would grant you immortality. Mongolian names are often very long and hard to pronounce. They're based on what the child looks like or what they do. Some have many different words put together to make them sound unique, like Ulaanbaatar, meaning Air Force City, or Dalai Lama. The first thing you should know about Mongolian names is that they're not very easy for non-Mongolians to say. Most people who live in Mongolia speak Russian as their first language, but even if you don't understand this language or any other spoken language, you can still tell when a person's name is going to be hard for you because it will include letters from two different languages, like Tumen and Tuvan. The Mongol Empire was a great place for women. It was ruled by Genghis Khan and his sons, Chagatai and Jochi, who encouraged their subjects to be educated and gave them rights that were unheard of at the time. But even though they were allowed to own property, marry outside of their caste system, vote, practice law and medicine, the list goes on, Women could not go into politics or military service. They also couldn't participate in government discussions or make money for themselves except through marriage. It's no secret that the Mongols were a smelly bunch. As you may know, they ate lots of meat and dairy products as well, which gave them an unpleasant smell. They also didn't bathe often or take care of their teeth or their hair. If you don't believe me, here's what someone who lived during this time said. The people are without exception filthy in body and clothes. They go naked except for one pair of trousers reaching down to their ankles. One of the most common and popular things in the Mongol Empire was owning human slaves. Slaves were a form of currency used as a form of payment for debts and taxes, and also to pay fines or services such as housework. Some people would buy a slave simply because they liked him or her. Others might take them as part of a romantic relationship. If you had enough money on hand, you could even just buy someone outright. You could even sell your own children into slavery if need be. It wasn't uncommon for families with small children, or no children at all, to sell them off into servitude in order to survive financially. The Mongols were a group of nomadic warriors who lived in the Middle East, Eastern Europe, Northern China, and Central Asia. They conquered lands that made them one of the wealthiest empires in history. Genghis Khan was worth an estimated $120 trillion today. That's more than Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, although they're not quite as rich. He had a lot of wealth because he seized power by force and conquered most of Russia for himself before expanding into China, Persia, and India. He also built many cities, including Samarkand, a city now known as Bukhara. The Mongols were known for looting and plundering their own people. The Mongols would often loot and plunder their own people, which they did for fun. They would also do it to sport with their victims. The Mongols were notorious for this behavior throughout history, but especially during this time period in which they ruled over much of Eurasia. The Mongols were a warrior culture, but they also loved to party. They would hold parties to celebrate victories, weddings, and births. The Mongols even threw parties when someone died. If a baby was born in the wintertime, for example, Mongol parents would throw a big celebration for it. Mongol funerals were elaborate affairs involving many things that are not traditional today. No embalming or coffins, burning bodies on funeral pyres, drinking until you pass out from alcohol poisoning, which happened more often than we'd like, eating beef heads. These kinds of things may seem strange now, but back then, this was common practice among nomadic peoples around Asia who still follow ancient ways of life, despite being exposed to Western culture over time through trade routes established through Genghis Khan's conquests across Asia and beyond. The Mongols loved blood sports, though they weren't big on eating animals. They would often kill the animals for sport and even did it in public. The Mongols were known for their brutality, violence, and brutality. When a child was born, the parents would name him or her after being buried alive for a day or two. The idea behind this was that if the child survived, it made him or her strong and healthy. If not, then there must have been something wrong with them. This practice continued even after Mongol rule ended in 1206 CE. In fact, some scholars believe that this practice may have been encouraged by Genghis Khan himself, who died in 1227 because he needed to see if his descendants were strong enough to rule over all of Asia as he did when he conquered China and Persia during his lifetime. Genghis Khan was the chosen one. He was a Mongolian leader who founded the Mongol Empire and led it to conquer all of Asia, including China, India, and Russia. Genghis Khan was born in 1162 in central Mongolia as Temujin, also known as Timur. His father, Nur Tengri, Golden Horse, was a chieftain of the Kiryat tribe living on a steppe near where present-day Ulaanbaatar stands today. As an infant, he became lost during violent weather conditions, but eventually found his way home with help from some friendly nomads who cared for him until he reached adulthood at age 12 or 13 years old, when he returned home after being away for several years, learning about warfare skills from local tribesmen who lived nearby, such as Tatar cavalrymen. Conclusion: the Mongols ruled over one of the biggest empires in history, and they had many crazy traditions. Some of these things were just for fun, but others could be very serious crimes. The Mongols were ruthless warriors who killed at will with no remorse for their enemies or innocent people caught in the crossfire. So next time you want to watch a movie about Genghis Khan, try imagining what it would be like if he was standing next to you instead. We hope you found this video interesting and informative. And if you have any questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.